Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to speak to you all. So, as Lydia mentioned, I am a third year in college, and last year I wrote a book entitled The Changemaker Attitude, Why Individuals Matter Against the Fight Against Climate Change. But I actually grew up in a small ski town in Colorado. Every year, my school had an outdoor education program in which the students embarked on a different outdoor adventure. Our eighth grade year, it culminated in a week-long backpacking trip through the mountains in a 24-hour solo where you only had a tarp and a notebook. Seems like a perfectly acceptable thing for a Colorado public school to enforce on all of its students. Growing up, my livelihood and the livelihood of my town was intimately tied to our surroundings. It's no secret that climate change is an imminent threat to my ski town. It's also no secret that every town is threatened by climate change, and this is terrifying. It's these visions of the world in flames that elicit mass reactions, but how helpful is this really? This is actually the point where we all get stuck. Most people recognize that climate change is an issue, but the pure scale of the problem stops us from moving past the initial fear. So instead, we tell ourselves this isn't our problem, or we don't have the capabilities, or it isn't really that big of a problem, or we personally didn't cause it, so we shouldn't be held accountable to its damages. Essentially, every day we're inundated with news of our impending doom, the massive, irreparable damage we have caused our planet that we're now starting to see play out in real time. It's overwhelming, and although we've been told these images are necessary to motivate the masses, we haven't really seen that play out yet. So here's the secret that we've overlooked. The negativity that we are being fed is not necessary or productive. Mentally, human beings were not really made to process this scale of tragedy or impending doom. So we just don't. Our minds find little ways to help us ignore it, and we end up here, a world with climate change deniers and people who believe the science but are just overwhelmed. So last August, I started the process of interviewing eco-innovators from around the world who seemingly had nothing in common. I spent all hours of the night talking to people from Sierra Leone and India and the US and Canada, basically everywhere. And it wasn't until my fourth or fifth 3 a.m. call to India that I began to understand these innovators all shared a common mindset, this passion and positivity that forced them beyond fear and obstacles. What I've realized is there's an attitude they all shared and one we can all learn from. This has given me immense hope for the future. The real solution to inaction isn't more exposés on how we really messed up, but actually positivity. I want to stress that this does not mean blindness. So there is a meaningful difference between hope and a denial of fact. But humans have to make the shift to believing there's a way out of this if we're ever to make these changes. So here's an example. 20 months ago, Alhaji Ba was living on the streets of Sierra Leone with $20 to his name. He's now the CEO and founder of Rascal Trading, a company that uses coconut shells to create handcrafted bags and baguettes. The biodegradable bags replace plastic ones, and the baguettes provide an alternative to burning firewood and charcoal, two of the leading causes of deforestation. These days, Ba sits between world leaders and climate change discussions and has been to the United Nations. I found him because he had been recognized for his achievements by a small newspaper in his hometown of Sierra Leone. He didn't have a LinkedIn or an email, so I Facebook messaged him. Ba was born in the eastern province of Sierra Leone. At age 13, he left school to work in the city after his father died. For 2 years, he lived on the streets of Freetown while working in a water factory until he found a family that took him in. He lived there, doing chores around the house and working full-time at a water factory until the mudslides in 2017 killed the entire family while he was at work. Rather than give up in the face of unrelenting tragedy, Ba used his last $20 to begin making handcrafted bags and baguettes from coconut shells because he learned that mudslides have been caused by deforestation. The interesting thing here is that Ba never saw himself as fighting climate change. Instead, he felt an obligation to his local community to solve something that affected all of them. It's all about perspective, and it isn't as scary when you envision yourself fixing a small local issue that has meaningful effect for you and those around you. There was no hesitation, just the need to solve a problem. I also cannot express enough, he never finished school past age 13. He didn't have any special skills. There was nothing unreasonable about his situation that led him to solve this problem except for passion. This leads me to my second point. Why individuals specifically matter in the fight against climate change. I want to stress those responsible for most of the polluting need to be held accountable, but their power does not diminish yours. The reason we keep struggling to accept this so much is because we don't believe in our own power and the seeming impossibility that your individual decision to not take a plastic bag from the grocery store is going to solve climate change. We constantly teeter between viewing ourselves as small and feeling restless to do something. This is because we aren't looking at individual actions the right way. We assume that our individual actions happen in a vacuum and that humans aren't social creatures who interact with one another. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and even E.D. Morrill, who history often forgets, but basically took down the Belgian king by exposing the widespread slave labor, murder, torture, starvation, and other horrible cruelties that were being touted as free trade in the Congo in the 1870s. These individuals changed the world in meaningful ways because they use their voices to inspire others. Individual people matter in the way that they use their voices and actions to create change. Studies have even shown that social norms are more influential than financial incentives in changing behavior towards the environment. Seems counterintuitive, but individual people matter because of what they can do collectively. While your decision not to waste an extra plastic bag doesn't make much of a dent in global waste, when a larger group of individuals believes it matters to bring reusable bags to the grocery store instead of plastic bags, they trigger others to do the same. This collective decision makes a small dent in the number of plastic bags used and shows producers there's less demand for them. Again, we do not exist in a vacuum. So, share informational posts on social media that can help others get involved. Partner with established organizations to help amplify your voice, and most importantly, talk to people about climate change. Not just the scary 2-degree related facts, but the real stuff. Talk about your fears, your misunderstandings, and how you think you can make an impact. In my journey of interviewing people, I came across a lot of researchers who have now had this issue of conveying their research to the general public. It doesn't really matter how much you collect research on climate change if it doesn't resemble anything anyone can actually understand. And what all those people said to me was that there's this deficit of the amount that we talk about climate change. And it's so important to just talk to people because even the climate deniers are scared to a certain extent. It all just depends on the way you talk about it. So even now, I struggle to find balance between productive individual action and meaningless displays of token environmentalism. On one hand, we spend so much of our time worried about minute things. We have big debates over small pieces of the puzzle, trivializing large issues like plastic pollution until we're yelling about the structural integrity of a paper versus a plastic straw, which are horrible. Paper straws are just horrible. Focusing on the smallest personal choices distracts us from the bigger, more structural issues occurring around the world. On the one hand, the belief that you have no power in the world creates a destructive pessimism that leads to inaction. Many people believe that in this global fight against climate change, individuals and their actions don't make a difference. But those people aren't paying attention to our secret weapon, each other. Our obsession with numbers and data have led us to overestimate the power of processes and underestimate the power of individuals. And that has been our biggest mistake. Through this process, I've talked to young people around the world who are doing incredible things. And if I've learned anything, it's that individual people do matter. They have the ability to make changes in their local community, inspiring others to take action as well. Their commitment and perseverance have proven to me that while humans are part of the problem, they're also our much needed solution. I put it in the description that I would be talking about what is keeping young people from taking action, but I truly believe that's changing so quickly. We've seen huge mobilizations of young people to influence change around the world and challenging existing power structures. I really think this emulates the trajectory of realizing your own power. When you start communicating and organizing and acting locally to make changes you can physically see, you gain the confidence to take on bigger issues and are less likely to be fatigued by small obstacles. I want to end with a quote by famous cognitive psychologist Amos Tversky. As a pessimist, you suffer twice. I'm an optimist, not because I think we have it all figured out, but because I see no other way of proceeding forward than with positivity, hope, and pure determination. After all, pessimism signals an action, and we don't have any time to wallow. Thank you.